Today's date, Wednesday, March 27th, 2024. I'm here with a distinguished son of the soil, Dr. Dorian Shillingford, which history records as being the first native Dominican to be the chief medical officer during the period of British colonial rule. Dr. Shillingford, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm fine, and I hope you're the same way.
Well, it's a high honor and privilege. I just want to take a moment before I ask you any questions to thank you for your many, many years of public service, not only to the citizens of Dominica during the colonial period, but after independence, and also to Africa, because I was told by you and others that you were a senior medical advisor to the government of Niger, which is in Northwest Africa. Is that correct?
That's quite correct. Right on the close to the Sahara Desert.
Close to the Sahara Desert. So you moved very far from the Arcadia-like paradise of Dominica, full of rivers and mountains and green forests and all, to near desert conditions. So I know you've spanned the globe. Dr. Shillingford, when were you born and where were you born?
I was born on 9th of April, 1930, in the town of Roseau.
Yeah. And who was your father?
My father was Alfred Shillingford.
Can you spell his first name, please?
E-L-F-O-R-D.
Alfred Shillingford.
Alfred Shillingford.
And the Shillingford family came from, I believe, history records, 3 English brothers from Yorkshire, England, who came during the slave period and after about 20, 30 years started having children with people of African descent. Is that correct?
They came in sometime, and I think 2 of them seemingly remained in Dominica, and one, I know certainly, moved over to Canada because I met the Canadian Shillingfords.
But they were initially white people, is that correct?
Yes, they were white people, yeah.
But then they intermarried with local Dominicans and Carib people, is that correct?
They had children with local Dominicans.
Yes, indeed. And by the time you were born in 1930, April 9th, the Shillingford still stood in great dominance in politics and estate holdings. Is that true?
Well, at the time I was born, I expect the Shillingfords would develop in their control over the estate holding and the commercial life in Dominica.
So, for instance, A.C. Shillingford was your uncle?
Yes, he was my uncle, and he was actually the father of my wife.
I see.
Oh.
I see. Okay. So he, A.C. Shillingford, had a great many estate holdings, and he also ran a store in Roseau called the Phoenix.
That's right. He ran a store in Roseau and several stores in Roseau. He sort of managed things very, very well.
Yes. And he also had a dance hall called Albert Hall. Is that correct?
That's right. Oh, you know that. I'll just listen today of somebody who said that they met in Albert Hall dance hall. That was the dance hall. Unless later on we got a place called Coronation Hall.
Well, I owe some of the knowledge I have, not only to having been born in Dominica myself and having known a great many Shillingfords in cricket, like Irving and Grayson Shillingford, others in estate holdings like Den Shillingford, but I also had the benefit of the work by one Dr. Irving W. Andre, who is a Dominican historian and jurist, who I'm sure you're familiar with, who wrote the story of A.C. Shillingford. You're familiar with that book?
Yes, I have that book. He did a lot.
There's also another relative of yours by the name of Dave Shillingford, Dr. Dave Shillingford, who's also written something on the Shillingford family. You're familiar with that?
That's right. I'm familiar. He tried to find out. It's a very large family, you know, the Shillingford family. I would say that the Shillingfords love having children.
Okay. But your mother, give us your mother's name.
My mother was Josephine Deschamps.
Deschamps, Deschamps.
P.S.
Deschamps, Deschamps.
That's right. And I mean, he was French Canadian and really came to Dominica to try to discover the world. And he remained here for just a while.
So
as
you're
a citizen.
saying your mother's father was a French Canadian civil engineer.
That's right. And he came here to the colonial office to help build the northern part of the island, particularly between Marigot and Portsmouth. You know, that was more the English part, and the other part was mainly French, put it that way.
So this is interesting for those who listen to this tape. You're saying your grandfather, your maternal grandfather, was a French Canadian engineer, civil engineer, who
Yeah,
came to build the northern part of Dominica, which was more English than the
that's right.
southern part, which was more French. Can you explain that to those who will listen to this report?
Well, I guess the French and the English, they sort of enjoy sharing Dominica for a long time. Because remember, Dominica was not colonized until 200 years after Christopher Columbus and these people of the islands were. It remained independent, you know. And there was the Kalinago people, as they were called at that time, the Carib people, you know. And that was it. But later on, I think the British decided they should get control over Dominica so that they could control the French, which were on either side, the island of Guadeloupe and the island of Martinique, which at the moment now they're no longer colonies, the Department of France. The history of the Caribbean. That's it.
So would you say then that your grandfather came to build like bridges and the like in the north?
That's what he did. Communication between the various villages and bridges, roads between Marigot and the Portsmouth. Remember that before that, there was very little communication between that part of the country and the rest. You know, there was no sort of transinsular highway as what we have, and we also did not have roads even on the Caribbean side. You went halfway from Roseau, you could go as far as halfway up that side to St. Joseph, and that was it. If you went further up, there were no roads.
Yes.
It took some time, but Dominica really, with all the mountains that we had, you know, we had mountains, and therefore if you have mountains, you have rivers, and if you have rivers, you have valleys, and if you have valleys, you need to be able to bridge them. So you had to build lots of bridges. On Sunday, I went around the part of Roseau, and I was surprised at the amount of bridges and that you had to really get. There were tiny bridges, but there had to be bridges because there were 365, you said rivers, at least there were 365 streams around the place coming from the mountain. Very pristine island, very, very pristine, a paradise.
Thank you. Dr. Shillingford, I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask you a little bit about the society that you knew on Dominica in Roseau, where you grew up when you were a child. And then I'll go into your education and then your medical school training and coming back to Dominica and your work in Africa. Tell me about Roseau in the 1930s. You were born on April 9th. Did you have electricity in your house?
No. We didn't have electricity. Electricity much later on. Gosh, it must be some time. Either around the war time, around everything. I can't
Did you have
recall.
electricity during the war, or was it after the war?
It's usually after the war, you know, as far as I recall. In fact, my uncle was in charge of electricity and telephones. Just imagine that.
What was his name? What was your uncle's name?
He was a Deschamps.
Okay.
Yes,
He was in charge of the power station.
the power station and also telephone. In those days, but the government ran the telephone system on the island.
So let me ask you this question. The Deja who was your uncle, what was his name?
Leslie
Leslie Deja.
Deschamps.
So was he the son of the same French Canadian?
That's right.
Do you
This
remember him?
the French Canadian had, as far as I know, 3 children. Leslie
3.
Deschamps, yeah. And I do not know how he developed his skills and what he was doing. My mother, who spent a lot of time helping me to become a better person, educational wise. And the other day, he joined in the First World War. He joined the British Army in the First World War. The First World War.
That's your mother's other brother.
Yes, the other brother.
But do you remember his name?
At the moment, I can't.
Okay, I may get it because we may have that in one of our books. But
Oh,
let
yes,
me
yes.
have your mother's name again. Spell your mother's first name again.
Josephine.
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 Yes.
Okay.
And that's right.
Okay.
And I said,
Now, let's get back to electricity services. So you had no electricity until after the war. So what did you use for illumination at night?
use a kerosene lamp or use a candle. That's what you use. And I spent all the time doing that, kerosene lamp or a candle. The electricity was on later on, just in a few places in Roseau, very limited, I think.
Tell
And
the listening
they
audience.
had to put it on for the hospital so they could operate an X-ray machine.
Okay. So you're saying they only had electricity in limited places. So give me the places. The hospital was one.
Yeah.
Where else?
Well, I mean, the hospital, and later on you had places with, I'd say like the cinema, you had to have electricity there. And that was it. I don't even know that the main stores or thing. During the war, I know that a few people had electricity because we could listen to the radio and go out in the streets, and about 3 or 4 persons, 3 or 4, that was all, had radios, and they stuck it on the verandas, and everybody could stand around and then listen to what was happening during the war.
Interesting. So only about 3 or 4 people during the war had radios.
Yeah.
Can you tell us who those persons were?
No. I know that, I mean, you had Dib family, there was a radio there that people could go and listen to it. There was Deschamps, my uncle had one.
Okay, stop a second. So you mentioned Dib. You mentioned Dib. Is that the same Ayub Dib, the Lebanese?
Yes. They were, that's right. They're Lebanese.
Ayub
They came
Dib.
in earlier. Ayub Dib came in, and then later on we had Nasif, and then you had Astafan, and of course you had another one, Eunice.
So you're saying these people had radios, is that correct?
Yes, I think most of them probably had to radio quickly thing.
So what about the local people like your uncle A.C. Shillingford? Did they have radios?
I don't know whether he had a radio, but I mean, yes. I know my mother's mother had a radio because, I mean, she liked it. They must have had radios as well. But I mean, their radios, they kept it to themselves. Whereas they would put it out so people could come and listen to the radio and find out what was happening in the rest of the world.
I see. So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that there were some people like your mother who had radios, but they kept it to themselves. But Dib placed his radio in a place where people could come and listen.
And listen, that is it. I mean, Dominica, is different, you know. People didn't, people managed all over the rural area. They called it cool men. We each helped one another.
Kudme.
Cool men,
Okay.
helping one another.
Cooperative self-help.
Cooperative self-help, always. So people survived, they existed, and if they didn't get an infectious disease that was fatal, they worked hard, they traveled around, they exercised, and they lived long.
Okay. Tell me about public health in that time. Did we have diseases like yaws and jiggers? Tell us about that.
Of course, we had yaws, it was a major problem, and we had typhoid, paratyphoid, we had tuberculosis. Tuberculosis was a major problem all over the world. It still is a leading infectious disease in the world today.
Yeah. Can you explain, Dr. Shillingford, to those who will be listening, what is yours and how would you describe the disease?
Okay, yours is like called parakeet, and it starts off with a skin disease. It can later on move into the body and affect bones and whatnot. You see?
So it presents as a sore on the body?
That's right. You know? Terrible, terrible.
And how did they conquer yours in Dominica? Can you tell us?
Conquered yaws by having a mass injection program. You know, we got
what were they injecting the citizens with?
Penicillin. Earlier, when I got yaws, you know, we either got an injection of bismuth or arsenical substance, but it wasn't very effective. But when penicillin came at the end of the war, wow, that changed everything. And there was a program to go all around the island to every village and give people an injection of yaws to stop that disease.
So how many injections would the average person have to take?
One. One. Penicillin was powerful. You know, I'll tell you a fact that I mean, if a man had gonorrhea, he got one injection of penicillin, and that was better. No, penicillin was very powerful. But as time went on, you did it more and more and more because the body began and the germs began to be more resistant to penicillin.
So yours right now in Dominica is pretty much something of the past.
We had a major program to eradicate yaws for all the islands, and Dominica was one of the islands where we had, you know, a doctor, and we had technicians who would be trained just for once to give an injection and control yaws.
Who was the doctor who oversaw the yaws eradication program?
Oh, well, we started with one that was an Englishman, but he did not really go out. I had a friend of mine from St. Vincent who came into Dominica to carry out the program. He was a classmate of mine in Aberdeen.
What was his name? Do you remember his name?
Cordis.
How you spell that?
Gideon Cordis. Cordice. Very interesting fellow. In fact,
Gideon, Gideon, Gideon?
Gideon Cordis.
And where was he from?
Oh, he was St. Vincent. He was also trained in Aberdeen. There I was. We became friends, and I brought him with me to Moscow. Wow.
One more time. Tell me about Moscow.
Oh, no, I won't tell you. That's another story.
Have you been to Moscow?
Huh?
Have you been to Moscow?
Yes, I've been there. I spent about 3 months in Moscow.
Tell
They
me
didn't
about
teach
that,
you-
Dr. Shillingford. I never heard about that.
The question was that, I mean, Moscow, very interesting country. And
Well,
they
Moscow
were
is the
trained-
capital of the Soviet Union.
the Soviet Union. It was the Soviet Union then. Very, very secretive. But the idea was that, I mean, they had a good idea of what they call epidemiology. Nobody could get sick in Moscow without the government knowing about it. And nobody could not work without the government knowing about it as well. So the way they handled the control of diseases, they knew it, they knew. And in a sense, their training was different. They did not train doctors in the usual way as they did in the Western world. They trained some doctors, like the West, but they trained doctors just to do sanitation, epidemiology, and what about keep the place clean. And they trained doctors to do a certain amount of really very basic services. Midwifery was also where they trained. They had actually 4 different set of doctors because they really had to get help control over this vast country as quickly as possible. So they started with this thing. So we went to look at the way their services. That was WHO.
Stop for a moment. When was that? Give us a time period when you went to Moscow for 3 months.
When did I go to Moscow? It may be somewhere in the 60s, I think.
In the 1960s. So you had already graduated from Aberdeen.
Oh yes, I graduated at Aberdeen. I graduated from Toronto, which is some very, very special training in Toronto. And I was looking at the health services in the Caribbean for the colonial department as well.
Oh, I see.
We were appointed.
Dominica at that time, when you went to Moscow, Dominica was still a colony of Britain.
That's right.
Okay, let's get back to the 1930s, and then we'll get up into the 40s and your college education. When you're a child in Dominica, how would you keep your meat and other perishables refrigerated?
No, you didn't refrigerate it, you put it out in the sun and you dried it.
So you had dried meats.
You dried your meat. The same thing that, I mean, after all, codfish. They produce a lot of codfish in Canada, in around Newfoundland area. And they took it out, they dried it, and they sent it. And in Dominica, we did the same thing. When we had fish, we took it out, we put it and salted it and put it on the rooftops, dry it.
So let me just understand. I think this is the second time I'm hearing this. I heard it first from Neville Wade from Portsmouth, who was a ship captain. He said his father would take kai and would put it on a sheet of galvanized iron metal, and dry it in the sun and sell it about, I think he said a pound of kai was 1 shilling or something like that. So you're saying that you salted fish and you dried it in Dominica on your rooftop.
And you dried it. Yeah, that's exactly what we did. And we did that for a very, very long time.
So, Dr. Shillingford, I'm trying to get this in my head. So when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, before grammar school days, did you have things like ice cream, for instance?
No, I don't think so. We didn't have ice cream. We had nice sugar cake and whatnot. But ice cream was there was ice cream, but very, very limited.
So there's no ice factory in those days?
No, there was ice factory came, let me see when. Which one? Yes, there was an ice factory.
Because I was born, when I was born in the 60s as a child,
Yes.
there was a huge ice factory at Goodwill,
Yes.
where the Goodwill School is located.
Goodwill.
Yes.
We had a factory then. At
And
the 60s.
they would have blocks of ice, this maybe about
Blocks of ice,
3 feet, 4 feet wide,
right?
and about 2 feet tall, and they would
Yeah.
hold it with big metal thongs.
Interesting. That's right. Yeah.
And then there's something called an ice pricker, which was like a metal,
Yes.
like
And you
nail,
can
like a
chop
big
it up or
nail.
what
You break it up.
That's where
You got
they did. They did have an ice factory then. You know,
Okay.
later on, and
So you could get ice drinks. You could get ice for ice drinks.
yes, you get ice cream. You get ice and some salt. You put it in it. You put the milk in the thing, and you turn it wrong. Turn it.
So this is what they call the ice cream made in a tub. It was a tub where you had
That's
to.
right. You see, any
What about the church? Were you Catholic?
yes, Catholic.
And did you go to church often?
Regularly we went to church.
What churches were in Dominica at that time?
Almost every village had a church. Remarkable.
There's a Catholic church.
Yeah.
And what was the what percentage of the population was Catholic in those days?
Oh, probably about 60-70%.
Okay. What about Methodists?
Hmm?
Were there many Methodists?
Methodists? No. As you know, there were not many, but I mean, they still existed, and they still exist. Huh? The Anglican.
What about Anglican? What about Anglican?
The Anglican became less and less and less because of the British church, and that was it. And the Catholics were in large numbers all over because we had the Belgians and we had the French, you know, who kept the country going, you know.
So in those days, Dr. Shillingford, there weren't any local priests, as we know of today.
Yes. It was the country was a good country. Now that's what it was. It's just that we were very slow. Slow to work, slow to develop. Huh? And when we got started, was when we started to, I think, make lines. The Shillingford and L roads benefited. The people did not, as they should. But later on, we had vanilla, and that made a big difference. I know people said, now I've got vanilla, my parents can send me to school or send me to university. Of course, we messed up the vanilla business. And that was it.
How did we mess up the vanilla business? Tell us.
You don't know. We exported false vanillas.
You're saying they exported false vanillas. Tell us about that.
People said it was vanilla, but it wasn't vanilla. So they said, damn it all, Dominicans are cheats. So we better stop buying vanilla from Dominica and go to an island. I think it was Madagascar or something.
Madagascar, yes.
Yeah.
So people were sending to England things that they purported to be vanilla, but was not.
England or to America. They were not. That's what I understand. So the dam closed down. Then later on, somebody taught them to grow bananas. And don't just grow bananas in your backyard so that you can eat bananas. Produce bananas for export. Use of scientific methods in having high production, high yields. And that changed Dominica. Remember, we used to have bananas that we could just throw away in the sea. So much we produced.
So you're saying that the production of the banana industry was so superior to what had prevailed prior that people had surplus bananas to the point they threw it in the sea.
Yes.
I remember seeing bananas rotting on the ground.
Yeah.
So are you
That's
saying it's
what-
the banana industry that built Dominica's middle class?
Yeah. There was lots of bananas and everybody benefited from it. The farmers benefited and everybody benefited. And then, well, somebody messed us up, not the country, right? The big plantations in Central America. They said, why do you buy bananas from Dominica and buy it at a higher price than you're buying whole bananas? Why are they being privileged? If you do that, then we will put a duty on what you're selling us so your stuff will not sell as easily in our country. That's interesting. So bananas died off.
So essentially, you're saying that the banana industry went into diminution, decreased in importance and vitality after the World Trade Organization made it be that Britain had to open its market to Chiquita and Dole, which
That's
are
right. You got the thing.
the higher producing plantations in Central America, South America, like Colombia,
Yes,
where they could produce at a greater rate
lower
at a lower
yes.
price.
At a lower price.
Okay, all right.
Because
Let's go back to the 1930s for a little bit. At the time you're growing up, it was limes pretty much at that time, right?
limes.
And Dominica, let the record reflect, at that time was the biggest producer of limes in the entire British Empire and produced limes for the Royal Navy as well. And there was something called lime juice.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Dominica was the largest producers of lime in the world. Roses lime juice. I didn't call it West, not Dominicans. Roses.
Doctor, as a physician by training, can you tell us how important lime juice was to the Royal Navy?
Well, yes, it was, because I mean, for treating scurvy. Scurvy.
What is scurvy? Can you tell the listening audience what scurvy is?
The lack of vitamin C. The lack of vitamin C. And to cause diseases. So your immune
What are the
system.
kind of, how does scurvy manifest itself in the human body?
Oh gosh, I can't remember now.
But I understand that you, for instance, have bad teeth and your teeth fall out and other things like that.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Carnival. Tell us about Carnival when you were growing up before the war.
Carnival. Lots of fun. People enjoyed it. A cultural activity. They could express themselves freely in Carnival. And in the calypso that they sang.
What were the instruments at that time, before the war? What instruments did they use in the band?
Oh, they had, at one time, but just before the war, around the war time, I think they began to have a steel band, but they dropped that. And then they had Lapo Cabuit. That was the main thing that we loved, you know.
And when you say Lapo Cabuit, you mean the goat skin drum?
The goat skin drums.
Do they have also
the flutes,
trumpets and saxophones?
Yes, flutes and whatever. They would blow that thing. They would blow even shellfish and whatnot.
The conch shell.
Yeah, you see, Dominica loved their carnival. Dominica is all about fete, siwo. Enjoy yourself.
Siwo is a Creole word for syrup, sweet.
Yes, siwo is syrup. Because Dominica was not a very highly developed country, but I mean, they enjoyed themselves. They lived well. That was it. As someone said, they didn't think there was any such thing as poverty. No. Because we didn't lack. We had the food, we had the drink, We had the shelter, somewhat, and we had one another. That's it.
Let me ask you, Doctor, tell me about the Botanic Gardens in your youth before the war. Would you go to the gardens and what would you do there?
Always go to the gardens. And sometimes we go there to try to steal some of the fruits to go and hide it and try to escape from the gardens.
So you're
Lots
saying
of
at the
fruits.
gardens, there were fruit plantations at the
Fruit
experimental station.
plantations, all
And you try-
varieties of fruits and everything else, We just enjoyed it. Any kind of fruit you could imagine, you have it in the gardens, All fruits of various quality, various kind, Later on, somebody decided they were to grow roses in the gardens, and that was stupid. And at the bottom, and didn't have all those fruit trees. And now I don't know.
Dr. Shillingford, let me ask you this. When you were a child before the war, did you go to the movies or cinema?
To
Cinema.
cinema? Of course we went to cinema. Every one of us, we went to cinema. Usually, we went to the pit.
You went to the
Because that
pit.
was the
Tell us about the
cheapest.
pit.
It was ordinary cinema place, and there was a pit, and there was the behind it on
The house.
Yes, the thing. It was just great, We enjoyed it. And
So the pit was for people who could not pay much money. That was
yes,
for the
that's
working
right.
class, and
Yes.
house was for the more
There was house and there was upper higher up.
balcony.
Yeah, whatever it's called. But and then we went there and we got ginger, a drink of ginger, whatever it is, from the people who sold it. We had cinema a couple of times during the week, and that's what we look forward to.
Where was the cinema located at that time?
It's located where the market now is.
Where the Roseau Market, the new Roseau Market.
The old Roseau Market,
No, the new Roseau Market.
By the river. Yes, that's right. The new Roseau Market, because behind that was the abattoir.
Yes, yes. I wasn't born at that time, but I heard that from Dr. Clinton. Dr. Clinton Shillingford said to me, there was a gutter called the Pee-pee Hole, and people sometimes go through that to get in.
Oh, yeah. Dominica, it's a great place, We are going to get back that way sometime. I think years, but no. People are coming to Dominica, back. I went out on Sunday, and I went to a restaurant. Fantastic. Run by a French couple. And the food was great. They said they left France and they went to Guadeloupe. And they went to Martinique. Martinique is very conservative. Guadeloupe is more like liberal, more like Dominica. But Dominica is the best place. They're selling in Dominica, And
is that the French restaurant at Pont-Cassé?
No, not the one at Pont-Cassé. It's a new one at La Plaine.
Okay.
There's one at Pont-Cassé that's very, very good. A Dominican is involved as well for Frenchman.
Let me ask you, Dr. Shillingford, what sports did you have in Dominica during the time before the war when you were growing up in Roseau?
Oh, yeah. That was Victor Ludorum. You know what it means? You know what Victor Ludorum means?
Victor Ludorum at grammar school was the person who was the best sports person of the year, I think.
That's right. It means winner of sports, but it only applied to athletics. They didn't apply to other subjects. So I was a good sprinter and could do a certain degree of high jumping and could just get around. And we had an event between the islands then. I think it was 1946. So, yes,
So you're saying in the 1930s there was the Windward Islands student tournament.
Tournament, yeah. It was either 1946 or it was 1947. Anyway, I went down there and we had the Windward Islands. And then people from Grenada, they were smart. They invited us to go out, have a day out on the Sunday before the Olympics. I'm sorry, the athletic event. And I had permission if I could take the team.
Now,
I went there.
Stick a pin in that, Dr. Shillingford. At that time, when you went to Grenada, were you a grammar school boy then, or were you a teacher?
I was a grammar school boy. Yes, I was.
Okay.
Because I remember when we went to Grenada, I was still at school. And there was Emil George. Very, very interesting guy. Became a lawyer.
Emil George
Really
was of Lebanese descent? Emil George, was he of Lebanese descent?
That's right. He was half Lebanese, half Dominican.
Okay.
Because as you know, those days, the Lebanese kept by themselves, Dominican kept by themselves, but some of them got together.
So Emil George's mother was a Lebanese or Dominican?
No, the father.
Father was Lebanese.
Father's Lebanese.
His mother
was Dominican.
I see.
They didn't get stay together, but I mean, they had 2 children. And Emil George, brilliant. We were in Grenada, and they thought that he would win the Island Scholarship. Perhaps he should. So I now know that we were both at school for the first tournament. But I was with Dorian. We went out, and the Grenadians gave us a lot of food to eat that Sunday. The next day I was so heavy I couldn't even get into a starting position to run the 100 yards. Gosh.
So stick a pin in that, Dr.
Couldn't jump.
You say that the Grenadians.
I was a total mess.
Let me understand this. So there's a Windward Islands tournament in Grenada, and the Grenadians came up with a plan. They fed you heartily, you ate heartily, and the next day you couldn't perform.
We couldn't do it. We couldn't do it. It was Grenada, St. Vincent, and Lucia, and they met in Grenada, and I made a mess of it. The following year, I went over as a teacher because I was made a supernumerary teacher of the grammar school. Imagine, they didn't have
supernumerary. Basically, you're like an assistant teacher.
Yes, but the senior science master to set the exams for the Cambridge, the practical exams and prepared the laboratory services. Because I mean,
before you go on, how many subjects did you do with Cambridge, and what were those subjects?
Oh God, can I remember that? You had to select 6 subjects, and I knew there was geometry, there was algebra, there was French. You had to do essay or literature, one of these things. But I excelled in the sciences.
Okay, so I have geometry, algebra, French. Did you have to take Latin as well?
Yes, you had to take Latin.
What about chemistry?
Chemistry, definitely.
What about biology?
There was one subject called general science. I don't know.
General.
whether
Okay.
it was
What about zoo? Did you do zoology?
There was one that they called general science. It was a mixture, either
Okay.
biology and whatever it is.
So when you left the grammar school, you became the senior science master. Why was that? Why didn't they not have a graduate teach science?
There were no graduates of the school. Teachers were not graduates in university. The Englishman who was there, Grayson, he was a graduate, yes, from England.
So the
But he
only
left.
graduate was Grayson, who was the principal.
But the principal,
What was Grayson's full name, if you can give it to me?
is it William Grayson?
William Grayson. Okay.
And he was not from Oxford. He was from another university. Prior to that, there was oh gosh, another teacher who was master of the grammar school and also education master as well. That was Julian,
Julian. Where was he from?
England.
And what was his? Was he science or arts?
No, he was art. He was art.
Arts. Where did he attend college in England? Oxford as well?
I think it was Oxford because he had in the bathroom wearing oars for rowing.
I'm sorry?
Oars for rowing.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. He had that. Of course, as you know, we had cadets, we had to learn how to shoot, we had to do all kind of things. You learn how to climb up trees, all kind of on the ropes.
So let me stop you for a moment because we're going to get to that in a moment. So you had Julian, who was an Oxford graduate, as a graduate headmaster, English guy. And after Julian, you had William Grayson, also
yeah.
Oxford, right?
Yeah.
English guy.
Yeah.
So in those days, there was a tradition of having Englishmen as the masters, as the headmasters of the grammar school.
And as you know, most of the heads of the departments were English. And then we got somebody from Barbados. What's his name? He was good. He was good. I know.
Are you talking about Victor A. Archer?
That's it. Yeah. He came afterwards.
Well, the record reflects that Archer was actually a St. Lucian. Huh? He may have gone to Barbados, but the record I've seen is that he was from St. Lucia and that he did McGill University in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get back to but let me get back. Yeah, but it's true that you had several teachers at the grammar school from Barbados. I was told it was chemistry.
We had teachers from Barbados, but they were not university graduates.
I see. Let me ask this question. So you got into the grammar school in
I would argue with them and they would disagree with me and put me to stand on the damn bench. They were wrong.
Let me ask you this about the grammar school. You got into the grammar school in 1940 or 1941?
41.
41. And did you win a scholarship to get there?
I won the scholarship in 46.
No. That's the island scholarship, but I'm talking about to go
to yes, I won a scholarship. You couldn't get into the grammar school if you didn't have money. Your father was a professional or a merchant or whatever it is. No, you couldn't. You had to win a scholarship. And they gave 3 scholarships. One was called Open. One for the boys was Country. And one was a boy from Roseau. They didn't give it to first, second, and third boy in the country. They gave it one for the country, one for Roseau, and one for thing. So They always
In
had to have one.
1941, you won the scholarship for Roseau.
Roads were right.
Do you remember who won the scholarship for the country in 1941?
Yes, the country I think was Revere. Arlington Revere.
Arlington Revere.
And the
What
other
about,
person was Haig Didier.
sorry?
Haig Didier.
Haig.
Haig Didier.
He won the
Haig.
Open.
Yeah, Haig Didier. Their fathers were headmasters of primary schools. So
I see.
they had all the advantage of being able to get books and papers and whatnot. Hey,
Was that the same LCDDA?
yes,
So the son of LCDDA
that's it.
won the Open Scholarship. Roseau went to Dorian, Shillingford, and the country went to Arlington Revere.
That's right.
Is that the same Arlington Revere who was a permanent secretary?
That's right. And he went to Canada, America, and did all kinds of things.
I think he
Characters,
later
I
went to
don't
Canada.
remember.
He went to Canada and passed away in Canada.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Shillingford. How many people were in your class at the grammar school, the first form?
Just 8.
How many?
Just 8.
8.
The number of students at the whole school were just 40 something, 41, 42. They were not educating people in Dominica. No. No.
In the entire high school, which was the primary high school for boys, there were 8 students in the first form, and in the entire school, 40 or 48.
That's right. You're lucky you have all 40 something left in the school.
Did you attend school with my uncle H.L. Christian?
Who?
Was H.L. Christian already graduated, or was he there when you were there?
Oh, Christian had graduated before.
I see. But did you remember him in Roseau?
Of course, I remember the Christians.
What can you tell us about them?
Nothing. Nothing. I know a Christian who was a minister for social services and what's his name now?
Health and Education.
Huh?
Minister of Health and Education. H.L. Christian.
H.L. Christian. He was fantastic. We worked together and we did a hell of a lot of good things together. At the end, he said, Dorian, I agree with you. You cannot continue in Dominica. You need to go away and help yourself. We went, for example, to Bermuda. There's the minister. He said, Dorian, you have to be with us, the ministers. I want you next to me. And we had to be a special part of the hotel with security, you know. My good friend. We did a lot together. He did a lot. We tried to develop the country, water supplies, toilets, all kind of things. Improve the environment. You know, that's another story.
Yeah. Let me ask you, at the grammar school, were you a cadet, an Army cadet?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that and how it shaped your character.
But all the boys had to be cadets. You had to be a cadet. And you either had a rifle or you had a stick.
You had to either have a rifle or a stick.
Yeah, there were not enough rifles. So they had a stick.
I guess it was the time of the war, so they didn't have any rifles to spare.
Exactly. And you went marching. You know, of course, you practiced shooting as well. You know, you had blank shots and you had a range on the grounds in the grammar school, and you had to practice how to aim and shoot. A great fun.
Did you have uniforms?
Of course, we had uniform.
Tell me the uniforms you wore.
I can't quote our uniform, but we had a uniform.
There's a khaki shorts, khaki shirts.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have the Australian bush hat?
No, we didn't have hat to that time. You had to have a hat. You always had a hat when you went to school. You could go to grammar school without a hat. You had to have a hat.
So let me explain. You're saying when you're in grammar school,
and you have to wear a tie, you know.
you had to have a hat and you had to have a tie.
Yes, a tie and a hat.
What was the hat made of?
A straw hat.
A straw hat. Was it
Yeah.
made locally or imported?
Oh, no, made locally.
Made locally. And it had a band, it had a grammar school band around it?
That's right. Well, you're privileged, you know, going to grammar school. No, you're privileged.
How would people regard the grammar school students in those days?
They thought it was fantastic that you at least you person in the grammar school, you had all the opportunities. You know, people wanted to go there, but they couldn't afford to go there. They couldn't afford, although it wasn't very much money.
How much were you talking in those days? How many pounds per year?
I don't know. I don't know what it cost. It was horrible. Until Mr. Dupini said, well, this is damn nonsense. We've got to get people into the secondary schools.
And what was his full name? Was that Clifton Dupini?
Yes, Clifton Dupini.
So he was a politician.
He was a politician. He was a lawyer. You know, he came from a humble beginning and did well. He did well.
And is he the father of the lawyers, Silma Dupini and Vanya Dupini?
That's right, Silma and Vanya. I know them very, very well.
Yeah. Was he a white Dominican?
No, good sir. He was a mulatto, a white fellow, you know. Okay. Yeah, good.
And when you say mulatto is somebody who's mixed between African and white.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was mixed, and they tried to give him a tough time, but he succeeded. He got out of Portsmouth, where he was sent to suffer malaria, and managed to help himself to go to England to become a lawyer.
Outstanding. Was he well respected as a lawyer?
Very much so. And I looked after him, and I looked after his kids and everybody.
I'm going to ask you a few questions about a few famous Dominicans who you may or may not remember. If you don't remember them, then just tell me. Cecil Rawle, did you know him?
Very much so.
Tell me what you know about Cecil Rawle.
Cecil Rawle, well, there is, oh gosh, I'm thinking of the young Cecil, who's my age. Of course, there's his father.
The father, the one whose bust is at the Princess Margaret Hospital up there, roundabout.
That's right, yeah. I don't know much about him. I just know that he was married to Shillingford.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What about JB? I know Cecil Rawle was a self-government advocate. He was before your time, but I thought maybe as a child you would have remembered him, but you don't remember him as a child.
No, I don't remember him as a child.
Okay. What about JB Charles? Do you know JB Charles?
Oh, yes, I remember him.
Tell us about him. What do you know about him, and what kind of person was he?
Very controlling. He had his own opinion of things, and people had to listen to him. When I came back to Dominica, he was the member responsible for health. And there was no nonsense. I arrived, and the next day expected me to take on duties at the hospital. because the hospital.
And at that time, it was the old hospital where the ministerial building is in Roseau.
Go to the new Princess Margaret Hospital.
Okay.
The
Princess Margaret Hospital was built in 56 or 55.
Oh, 56.
Okay.
56.
Okay.
When I came in, it had been opened for, I was late. I was supposed to arrive before it was opened and to take charge. It was opened before I got there. And when I arrived, immediately said I must take over, get on duty, and take charge of the hospital. I had just come from Dominica. I was a junior doctor. Everybody was there before me. But he put me in charge of the hospital. It wasn't easy. The doctor in charge then, who was from Poland, he decided no way. He's no longer going to work at the hospital. And
What was his name?
Steiger.
Dr. Steiger said he's not going to work under you?
He didn't say so. He said he made up his mind. He said he's sick. He's getting a heart attack. And he can no longer work in Dominica. And he wanted to be boarded off so he could go away. Because he ran the hospital as it was his private hospital. He was going to take anything. The matron, an Englishwoman, said, no, she's not going to reside on the hospital premises. She's not. But he said that's the house you should stay because you should be available, for an emergency.
So you wanted the matron to be on the premises?
I didn't. The government had made a rule. They have rules. They have a hospital rules. I said, well, if you don't want to stay on, you have to make your men. I've got to inform the government. And you'll be dismissed. So she resigned. So the two white people resigned. And I was there trying to do it all by myself. But I was lucky. I got a young girl from Grenada. She had been trained in England, very bright.
What was her name?
I don't know.
But she was a matron. She was in charge of the nurses.
She was the matron. And from the time she came there, she kept telling me what she needed the nurses to do, how they were supposed to behave. I wasn't always listening to her. I wasn't.
But doctor, so you came, let me understand. So you came from Aberdeen, and your first substantive position was
in charge of the hospital.
I'm sorry?
In charge of the major hospital in Dominica.
And you had no prior experience?
I had not been in Dominica. I had experience. I'd worked in the hospitals in Scotland. I'd worked in hospitals in Cardiff, where I went to tuberculosis hospital, because I studied how to deal with tuberculosis, the biggest killer in the whole Caribbean. And that is why, within years, couple of years, the British government built a new hospital for the TB patients.
And that was west of the main hospital, called the TB ward, right?
That's right.
Okay.
They built it.
Okay. So when the hospital is saying to me, when the hospital was initially built, there was no tuberculosis section, but subsequent, I remember that section, it was to the west of the main building. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Let me go back a little bit because I want to wrap up grammar school. I want you to tell me about your time at grammar school. What were your best subjects? Who were your best teachers? And then we'll go to your medical education. Tell me about grammar school. You told me about the cadets. What sports did you play at the grammar school?
Athletics. I was really no good at anything else.
What did
No.
you? Well, I know the Shillingfords were good in athletics. Did you
The
run?
Shillingford was
jump?
good at everything. But I was just there to study. Just to study, to teach myself. I taught myself subjects that I never taught in grammar school, like calculus. I taught myself.
How? What books? Where did you get the books in calculus?
Oh, I could get books from anywhere. And I could order books too.
Tell me
could.
the role the library, the Roseau Public Library, played in your intellectual maturation.
Oh, there were lots of books at the public library, lots of books. And if you wanted a book, they could order it for you, you know. They, what's the name? The two women. Gosh, their brother. Well, I can't remember him right now.
But
He
you
was
told
a-
me you told me earlier that they allowed you to take the books home, but other folks had to stay in the library to read the book.
Yes, you had to stay there to read it. You're comfortable. You have sat in the broad veranda. You could read, but I mean, what's his name? C.G. Philip allowed me to take it home. I could take it home and read and return it. Gosh, I'm thinking of the guy, the two ladies who lived higher up the road, the King George V Street. Their brother, son, became chief of police at one time in Dominica and had to
Blanchard?
retire.
Blanchard?
Blanchard.
So the lady who was running the library was the Blanchard's aunt?
Yes. Two ladies, the Blanchard, they were running the library.
Were their parents from England, the Blanchards?
I don't know where they came from. They were the local, they were West Indian.
Okay.
But
Let
they
me ask
probably,
you, West Indians. Let me ask you about, so you told me about J.B. Charles. What about J. Ralph Casimir? Do you know him?
very well.
Tell me about him.
Brilliant. He was a bit of like a lawyer, but he wasn't one. But he knew a lot about Africa, about African people. He studied them thoroughly. And I learned a lot from him because we lived less than 100 yards away, and I could visit himself and his children and everything else. Like Rupert Casimir, my good friend. Rupert was a bit older than me. But you know what Rupert would do? He would take a book from the library at the grammar school and he'd pass it on for me to be able to read it. I wasn't at the grammar school then, but I had access through Rupert to the books.
So Rupert was at the grammar school before you?
Oh, yes, he was there before me. But while he was there, we lived next door to one another virtually, and he helped me. He helped me to access all the things that I wanted. And his father was good. I think his father made my father's will. So he made sure that I inherited something.
Let me ask you about Mr. Casimir. Was he a Pan-Africanist, someone who believed in Africa?
Yes, he certainly. An African independence and whatnot. He wasn't that power. He believed in Africa. He believed that, I mean, Africa is a great country. I have quite a bit about Africa as well in my library.
I'm going to ask you about that in a moment, but let me get back to
no.
let me get back to other famous
I haven't
people.
read these things. The last you gave me, I haven't been able to read it. Oh, I think no, didn't you? Your good friend Irvin. I haven't been able to read it.
Let me ask you about Phyllis Shandolfrey. Did you know Phyllis Shandolfrey?
Who?
Phyllis Shandolfrey, who started the Labour Party.
Of course, I knew her very well. Very, very well.
What kind of person was she?
She was one of the, what I call them, Fabian socialists. Brilliant, you know. She felt that we needed to help others, love and help others. She was told that she must help me to lead the services in Dominica. She was told so when she was in the federal government. And they did get in touch with me, the person who was the chief medical advisor to the federal government. And I said, no, before I take on that job, I need to be fully trained. And I was sent to Canada for an exceptional training program. Because Toronto was the only place of 12 universities to recognize as capable.
So when did you go to Canada for medical training? What year?
By 61.
61. University of Toronto, Toronto, Canada.
School of Hygiene.
School of Hygiene.
Yeah.
But before we go to that, which is 61, I want to get through the war. Tell us what you remember about the war.
The war?
Was there a lot of deprivation, like you couldn't get food or things like that?
No. In Dominica, we had food. Even German, what was it? Pork. They
call the pork Boda Jaman.
You got it?
My parents told me about that.
We had food.
They said they would sell big pieces of pork, right? in barrels.
That's right. Came in barrels. But we had things. We ran out
and for those who will listen to this, Boda Jaman means the backsides of the Germans.
The German, that's right. The backsides of the German.
People thought they were selling to Dominica the backsides of the Germans that had been killed.
Remember we had about 10,000 Frenchmen coming through to Dominica during the war.
These were the refugees from the French army.
Well, they were going to join the French army.
Yes.
They were going to join de Gaulle.
Yes. Do you remember them?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I remember them.
Tell us about that.
They're always drilling around.
So stop. You're saying, when you say, they.
1, 2, they.
Okay.
I mean, 1, 2, 1, 2.
That was their cadence. That was the marching cadence.
Yes, that was when they were drilling. And we had to feed them. So they ate up all the cows we had in Dominica. They ate it all. It was not easy. We couldn't get them both to German. So we had to import cattle from Montserrat. And they came on a whatever boat or schooner, and they dropped them in the sea, and the cattle swam ashore.
So they imported cattle from Montserrat.
That's
they
right.
dropped them in the sea, and they would swim ashore.
And they would swim ashore. We had no.
And you saw that. You saw that with your very own eyes.
That's right. There were no more cattle in Dominica, which created a problem, because after, when we had to feed children with milk, we had no milk. Mothers have no milk. They had to get powdered milk, and the powdered milk would cause diarrhea and everything unless we sterilize it by boiling, put it in boiling water. It was tough. But Dominica, we survived. We worked hard, and well, the people struggled a lot, or the people from the Caribbean struggled in Carinago because they were very poor.
I spoke to your cousin, Dr. Shillingford, Dr. Clayton Shillingford, and he
Yep.
said he saw on occasion, my mother also saw it, the periscopes of the submarines outside.
That's right. They would come around because I mean, remember they torpedoed those Canadian boats that are coming in and to supply us with food.
Like
and
the Lady
everything.
Drake and the Lady Hawkins.
Yeah, Lady Hawk and Lady Drake. Good. We survived.
So the Germans, let the record reflect, were torpedoing ships around the islands.
Exactly.
Did you see anything wash ashore like debris? Did you see any debris wash ashore from the torpedoed ships?
No, I didn't see it, although I had a friend who came in to clean up one in Grenada, which was torpedoed. He had to go in the waters to clear it out. No, there were difficult times, but we survived.
No. Now tell me about your island scholarship. How did you win the island scholarship?
I said because I did science. And when I went into mathematics subject, I finished 20 minutes before anybody else. I just walk out.
Why were you finishing 20 minutes before everyone else?
Because that's my subject. You get the thing, you work it, you're right or you're wrong. If you're right, you get 100%. That was, and France, not for Trinidad, you know what they did? They decided they will not give one scholarship. They give a scholarship for science, mathematics, and so on, and one for modern studies. You can't compare the two.
So you got the scholarship in 1946, and then how did you get to England or to Scotland?
Oh, I left Dominica by boat. I remember I traveled with Dr. Billy Green. He was going to Canada. I was going to England. And we went into a storm that night, so we couldn't continue. We had to stop in St. Lucia, and eventually we got into Barbados. And when I got into Barbados,
Do you remember the name of the boat?
I think the Monica.
The Monica.
A small boat. It was just a, I don't know what they call it, multi-torpedo boat or something like that.
A schooner.
It wasn't a passenger boat, just an army boat, small boat. Anyway, we got into Barbados. When I got into Barbados, I spent a couple of days there. And then I took a flight from Barbados to Trinidad. Imagine that.
Was that your first aircraft?
My first air travel.
What was that like?
Oh, exciting. I never knew it was a small flight, and not many of them. And went down to Trinidad. And when I arrived in Trinidad, I spent a couple of nights there. And then I got a boat called the Arikoni. It was a banana boat. It came from England, carried goods and so on to Trinidad, discharged it there, left Trinidad, went on to Jamaica. And I traveled from Trinidad to Jamaica to the Olympic teams at the time when Arthur went and we broke all kind of records. We traveled into
So you traveled with the famous Arthur Wint.
That's right.
He was in the Royal Air Force,
Really?
and he won he broke a record in
Yes.
1948.
Yeah. That's it.
Amazing. So you knew Arthur Wint.
Yeah. when we got into Trinidad, into Jamaica, I
And
had
for
a
those who
deputy.
don't know, Arthur Wint is so famous in Jamaican history that there is a statue of him at the National Stadium in Kingston, Jamaica. He's in a pose of a runner.
Yeah,
He won a gold medal at the 1948
1948.
Olympics in London. Were you there?
No.
It says
I wasn't in London.
Arthur Stanley Wint, ODMBE, May 25th May 1920, 19th October 1992, was a Jamaican Royal Air Force pilot during the Second World War, a sprinter, a physician, and later High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. He competed at the 1948 and 1952 Olympics as a medical student at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London. He won 2 gold and 2 silver medals and becoming the first Jamaican Olympic gold medalist.
That's right.
So you traveled on the boat that took the Jamaicans.
I know that the Jamaican people were on that boat. I believe he was in that. Some of the girls I met. And then we went to Jamaica. On that boat, traveling from Trinidad to Jamaica, I had to be the deputy prime minister of Trinidad. And when we arrived in Jamaica,
I just wanted to show Arthur Wint. That's him here
know.
running. You see him?
Wow.
That's Arthur Wint.
Okay.
Yes. I'll stop it, but go on, tell us about who you met on the boat.
And I met, when you arrived there was the Deputy Prime Minister of Trinidad. I met the Prime Minister of Jamaica. He came on the boat to welcome his colleague from Trinidad.
Who was the Prime Minister? Was that Norman Manley?
No.
Bustamante?
Bustamante.
You met some famous people.
So anyway, I decided I was not going to stay on Kingston. I'll turn the boat and go to Port Royal. I wanted to see what that place was like that sunk. And that was another story. I think we'll have to have a second session,
I know. But let's get as much as we can from this session.
Look at the time.
I'm enjoying this. This is wonderful. I mean, you went to school in Moscow, you were in and now you're meeting Arthur Wint and Bustamante. So what was it like meeting other West Indians for the first time?
Meeting this famous man, it meant a lot for me, I saw exactly what was happening in the Caribbean because by that time, I had a special relationship with the Caribbean by the Colonial Office. They appointed a standing committee for medical research and whatnot, an advisory body for the Caribbean. And there were, I think, 5 doctors, chief medical officers, and 5 permanent secretaries. And we organized things for the whole Caribbean, make decisions before they actually had a Ministers of Health conference organized. It meant the Caribbean were really supposed to be just one group of people.
So let me ask you this question, Dr. Shillingford. Do you believe that we should have remained as the West Indian Federation?
I believe that we should be federated. Definitely. We're too small to live independently. No way.
And let the record reflect, for those who will be listening to this, that the British West Indian Federation lasted from 1957 to 1962, and then Jamaica pulled out after the referendum was lost.
Jamaica pulled out, Trinidad pulled out.
Trinidad pulled out, and then it broke apart.
anything.
Jamaica became independent in August of 62, Trinidad later, that same year, August, I believe, and then Barbados in 66 or thereabouts. Let me ask you about two Dominican physicians who were the children of J.B. Charles. And if you knew them, Dr. Lawrence Charles and Dr. Rennie Charles. Did you know them?
I did meet with them. Lawrence, I met with him in Barbados. He had retired in Barbados. The other guy, I met with him once. I think he came to Dominica and he decided that we no longer needed to have a home for the leprosy patients. They were not that infectious. All we need to do is to keep a good eye for any cases and treat them if they do occur.
So let me stick a pin in it. So you're saying
Dominica
used to have a leprosy problem. We had a leper home.
Yes, we had a leper home.
But when was leprosy conquered or eradicated? What year?
I was not here.
Okay.
So they must have closed it down.
Yeah, I remember it as a child. My mother would show it to us. It was a taru going to St.
Taru, yes. It was a taru.
Taru, right?
But I was not in Dominica when he came across and he said, no, you can't
How were
afford
they able to eradicate it? Was that penicillin again?
No, to just discharge the patients. They were not infectious.
So you're saying that leprosy is not an infectious disease?
He said at that time they were not. It takes time to transmit leprosy from one person to the other, you know.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he just closed them down. I met the patient later on. One was called, Viacaz, and he was okay. Making back down.
So you never really had any professional relationship with Rennie Charles or Lawrence Charles. They practiced overseas.
Yes, I was overseas. I met Lawrence because he lived in Barbados, and I was then the chief medical officer of Barbados. That's another time I really.
So you're saying, stop a second. You're saying you were also the chief medical officer of Barbados at one point?
Of course.
I didn't know that. How long?
You really didn't know it. We'll talk about that later on.
When did you become the chief medical officer of Barbados?
In 1985, I think.
Okay. And for how long?
For 5 years.
5 years. So 85 to 90.
Yeah.
Amazing. That was during the time of Tom Adams?
Tom Adams wanted me to get there, and he died the day before I arrived.
You're kidding me. Say what you just said again. Repeat what you just said to me.
Yes. I said Tom Adams wanted me to be there, and he died the day before I arrived.
Amazing. So the Prime Minister of Barbados at that time was Tom Adams, the son of the former Premier, Grantley Adams. He wanted you to be in Barbados as the chief medical officer.
Yeah.
And he died the day before you arrived.
That's right.
How did he die?
I really don't know.
Did you attend his funeral?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Let's get back to Dominica and your travel to England and then on to Scotland. What was Scotland like in 1946?
The north of Scotland, the Scots developed the world. They were isolated. They were very isolated, you know. That Scotland, there were the Scottish people. A lot of them moved from Scotland to develop the rest of the world.
You're saying the Scots were very isolated. Were they friendly?
Very friendly. Very friendly. I mean, they couldn't understand who the hell I was. Who's that guy living in a middle class society? No, because as you know, Britain had it. And he seems very different.
I
I
remember
never
you saying to me
explained it.
that Britain had 4 classes. Can you explain the 4
1 to
classes
4?
that Britain?
Is it 4 or 5?
Well, you tell me.
I
You
don't
live
know, but
there.
I know there was a class. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Explain for me.
Like that. And if you're a professional, like a doctor, they'll push you right away class 5.
Explain the 5 classes in Britain that you found.
I don't know. Look it up. Go to Google and find out.
So
I
where
really-
were you as a professional, as a
I
doctor?
know that when I went to Britain, I live in the suburbs of Aberdeen. There were no colored people anywhere around for miles. Okay?
No
And,
colored people at all.
No, because what they go to Scotland for? The Jamaicans all about the this in England, the army and everything. Scotland is like the Highlands.
So
They're far up
when they would
north.
meet you, what kind of questions would they ask you?
What question did they ask me? They wouldn't ask me any questions. They just knew I was a friendly individual, knowledgeable. That was it. I was good at playing bridge.
I see.
which
How did you
only
learn bridge, Dr. Shillingford?
I taught myself bridge.
You taught yourself
Well, I
bridge.
taught myself a lot of things. There were books.
So you taught yourself calculus.
Yeah.
You taught yourself bridge.
That's right. I taught myself bridge. And I loved playing it. Sometimes I'll get into trouble because I'll be playing bridge with some friends around lunchtime, and the bus take me to my classes in the afternoon. I would miss the bus, so I would miss the classes.
So you're saying you're so engrossed in playing bridge that you'd miss the bus for your classes.
That's right.
Let me ask you, Doctor, you're now 94 going on 95 years old.
No, I will be 94.
You'll be 94 this year. And so would you say that bridge has done a lot in keeping you mentally agile?
It has kept my brain very active. We all know that if you have bridge, your brain is stimulated, it's active and good. You don't suffer from Alzheimer. But I tend to be forgetful these days because there's far too much for me to know. So, for example, I say, no, I cannot know all that is needed in medicine. Let me put medicine aside. Because the fact is,
do you take any supplements for the brain?
today I take a tablet called vitamin D, and somebody said today it was published, why should people be taking it? It doesn't necessarily do that amount of good that they say it's supposed to do.
What are you taking? I missed it. What are you taking?
Vitamin D. Vitamin D.
Okay. So vitamin D is recommended?
It's recommended. But now they're saying it doesn't really do any good. So why should people be wasting money? And 20 or 80 billion dollars is spent on vitamin D in America. The pharmacists are making a fortune, and medicine is suffering.
Let me ask you this. Right now, Doctor, you are also a member of the Dominica Bridge Society.
Yes, and yeah.
You represent Dominica overseas.
Yes, I'm going next week.
Next week?
I think
Where are you going next week?
The 10th.
10th of April.
Yes, I'm going to represent Dominica.
Where are you going? Where are you going?
Guadeloupe.
And what are you going to do there?
I don't know if it'll do because Guadeloupe is much stronger. My friend wants to leave me just now.
No, go ahead.
Guadeloupe is probably the strongest team in the region.
So you're going to Guadeloupe on a bridge tournament?
Yeah, right. Against Guadeloupe, and they're really very good.
So who are the members of the Dominica Bridge Club that play with you?
That play with me? Oh, God. There is Dr. Astefan, Albert Astefan, Fred Issa, Dr. Richard Green. What again? Who? Volney, Henry Volney, and somebody, Fidel.
Is that Mikey Fidel?
No, Fidel. He used to be in the laboratory at an hospital.
Okay.
That's about it. And
So these are the names that I have. Dr. Richard Green, who I know quite well. Fuad Issa, who I know. Henry Volney taught me European history at sixth form. Albert Astafan, I know him well enough. His sister is a good friend of mine, Rosalind, and the Fidel gentleman who was at the lab. Is that the brother of Mikey Fidel?
He's one of the no Fidel from.
He's the brother of, he's the son of Stanley Fidel.
Stanley Fidel.
I see. So
He's
that's
one
the
of
Dominica. That's the Dominica.
Children.
I'm sorry?
Outside child Stanley.
So that's the Dominica Bridge Club.
Yeah.
And you go to different islands in the Caribbean. How far have you gone? Have you gone outside the Caribbean?
We don't go out nowadays because we only have the OECS tournaments and we play against Martinique. And that's about it. I go out.
I see.
Supposed to go to Canada to play.
And how good is the Dominica team? Where does the Dominica team rank in the OECS?
Oh, it doesn't rank. It's probably just after Guadeloupe and Martinique.
So we're pretty high then.
Yes, pretty high.
Very
The
good.
other islands don't seem to do as well as we do.
And would you say that you're the senior bridge master, if they can call you that?
Well, I've been playing bridge for 70 more years, I played for Barbados. I represented Barbados at bridge. I represented Niger at bridge.
You represented Barbados in bridge. You represented Niger in bridge. Of course, Dominica.
Yeah.
And in Scotland, you represented Scotland as well?
Aberdeen University.
The university.
And that meant, because I play bridge, people respect me as somebody special.
So how long were you at Aberdeen studying medicine?
6 years.
And what did you specialize in?
I wanted to do surgery. So I was doing surgery. I was in Edinburgh at the time. And somebody came from Dominica and told me people are dying from tuberculosis. And people were dying. People don't understand it. The major cause of death. Tuberculosis in Dominica.
So the major cause of death in the 1940s was tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis.
Wow. So who came up and told you that people are dying? Do you remember the person?
Oh, well. Howell Shillingford came up with a politician.
Yeah.
And he asked me, the government want me to specialize in tuberculosis. So I spent a whole year at a major TB hospital learning how to deal with TB, tuberculosis. And when I came down to the Caribbean, there were only about 4 of us in the Caribbean who really knew how to handle tuberculosis. Most
What
cases,
is the main treatment for tuberculosis in that period? What is the main?
We were fortunate at that time. They discovered a drug called streptomycin.
Streptomycin.
Very, very powerful. But it costs a lot of money. Can you afford to use it?
So did the British government make it available?
Yes, the Dominica government agreed we would buy it. and give it to the patients.
Where was
But
it
it's
purchased
not the
from? The
only drug.
States? Was it
That
purchased
is
from the States or from
streptomycin.
England?
No?
Where was it purchased from? The States or from England?
Oh, you bought most of it came from the States, or sometimes from the UK too, depending. The streptomycin, and there was another drug called pyrazinamide. They're still very used for tuberculosis, and isoniazid. We use 3 different drugs.
Tell me what those 3 different drugs were.
It's just a streptomycin, pyrazinamide, and isoniazid.
Streptomycin, filaminazide, and,
Yeah.
and what's the last one?
Isoniazid.
Isoniazid. Okay.
So we had to buy these things. It cost a lot of money. And treat a patient, usually up to 6 months. Very expensive. But it did the work.
Outstanding. And then the cause of death in Dominica from tuberculosis went all the way down.
Oh, yes. Went
Just
down.
Just like the
Because of-
incidence of yours after the introduction of penicillin went all the way
A
down.
lot went down. A lot went down. We were very active. I was lucky. I had 3 doctors, and they did the work.
Who were they? Who are those 3 doctors? Can you give us their names?
Dr. Watty, Dr. McIntyre, and Dr. Griffin.
And these were all local doctors.
Yes. And later joined by Dr. Sorrento. You know what happened? These doctors were local and they stayed in Dominica. They didn't run away.
And we were lucky for that as a country. Very lucky.
They stayed with me and they did the work. And I got the benefit.
So you had Dr. Watty, Dr. McIntyre, Dr. Griffin, Dr. Bernard Sorrento.
That's right.
What about Dr. Winston?
Vincent as well. And then Dr. Green.
That's Billy Green.
Billy Green. The doctors came, they did not go away. Before that, people went away. But they stayed. And Dominica became a very healthy society.
So you're saying then, because of the culture of duty by these early Dominican-born doctors, the fact that they stayed in Dominica, were loyal to Dominica, were dedicated to Dominica, were professional, the health indices went way up.
Went down. I mean, the health indices went up.
That's right. And disease incidence of
mortality
chronic
went down.
diseases like yours, tuberculosis, all those things went down.
Okay, that it. I'm going
Fantastic.
now.
Now, I'm going to wrap up, and I know we're going to have to do a part 2 on this because we've got to go for dinner. So let me just wrap up a little bit. So how long were you Chief Medical Officer of Dominica?
For Dominica?
Yeah.
I retired in 1975.
So you're a Chief Medical Officer from 1954?
No. I was appointed Chief Medical Officer. Gosh. Let me see, when did Dominica get a kind of independence?
Dominica became an associated state of Britain in 1967.
1967?
67, under Edward Oliver LeBlanc. But the Queen came to Dominica in 1966. And there's a photograph of yourself and Billy Green with the Queen, that's Queen Elizabeth, at the Princess Margaret Hospital. And I believe at that time you were already Chief Medical Officer.
Well, I was acting. I was acting because basically the government can't pay you. So I decided I would act, and I'll get half the salary of my posts and half the salary of the chief medical officer. So I got a little bit more that way. But in 1967, when Edward LeBlanc, they got a kind of a independence.
Associated statehood.
Hmm?
It's called associated statehood.
Associated thing. That's when I was appointed.
Okay. So let me ask you this. What kind of leader was Edward Oliver LeBlanc, if you can remember? Do you remember him?
Oh, Oliver LeBlanc?
Yes.
Oh, I remember him very well. He was good. Very good. People just don't understand. I mean, he'd sit down and he'd criticize the opposition so that he could win the election. I remember that very well. But he was good. You know what he did once? There was a meeting of the ministers of health in Trinidad. And he said, Dorian, you go and you represent Dominica. Of course, she didn't have to pay for me to go because the colonial office was already prepared to pay for me to go, or the group. Of course, the minister couldn't really like that. I went to Trinidad. I said, listen, I'm not the minister. The Trinidad said, but you are the minister. You're representing the minister. I said, I'm not the minister. You better call Dominica government. I'm not the minister. They called the government of Dominica. He said, Dr. Shillingford can take all the decisions that are required except the financial decisions. that was Edward LeBlanc.
I think that was very wise because, you know, it's very important for us to have capable people in the particular areas where there's need for expertise. I don't think it makes any sense to have someone who's a minister of works who has very little understanding of works, or medicine who has very little, I mean, health has very little understanding of health, or finance has very little understanding of finance. We need to meet the challenges of governance by applying the competence of the citizenry to that particular task.
Exactly.
Huh?
So LeBlanc was good. I mean, once he told me, well, listen, there were two nurses from a different party. I told him, forget about it. They're not going to be transferred. They will remain there. They have nothing to do with the services that they're providing. He understood that. Another time he told me, well, I need to get a toilet built because we had to build public toilets, remember, in Dominica. And I said, no, I need a public toilet at my home. He told me, well, I need it somewhere else. I said, listen, I wanted now. Find the money. We'll build two this year. And he agreed. And that's how we got on.
Yes.
And
So,
in
doctor,
fact,
you're
I
saying to
went
me that you were
I
able to
went-
advocate successfully.
Exactly. We talked and we tried to understand this is Dominica. We are all there to serve. So the final thing that happened, there was a meeting of health ministers of the Commonwealth. Commonwealth, not of the Caribbean. It was way out in Mauritius. And most Commonwealth countries could not afford to go there. They couldn't afford to travel because you have to go to England, then go to South Africa. I said, I'm going. And I went there, and government did not have to pay, but I represented the associated states. And I spoke to ministers. I told them how to help the colonies improve their health services. And they listened to me. That was
Dr.
very
Shillingford, this is very interesting, you know, because, you know, I see in you a very
But how
passionate.
did I get to Mauritius all the way there? An American company paid all my expenses.
Amazing.
They gave me a grant to help develop myself.
Was that the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID?
Millbank Memorial Millbank Memorial Fund. You
World
can look
Bank
it up.
Memorial Fund.
What they
Outstanding.
did, they gave me the money. Develop yourself because they think you are going to make a difference in
Let
health.
me talk about public health in a moment, about another aspect of public health. So I knew about jiggers and yaws from my parents. So the yaws was something I was told that's akin to syphilis and would
Yeah.
manifest itself in sores. Is that correct?
They're both parakeets.
I'm sorry?
They are both caused by parakeets, yours and syphilis. They're
Caused by
different.
spirochetes.
Yes. The bacteria is
Bacteria.
similar.
The
Bacteria.
bacteria-based.
Yeah.
The jiggers, though, was a mite.
Hmm?
Jiggers was a mite.
A mite?
The jigger was a mite that burrowed into the skin.
No, jigger, yes.
It
Yeah.
went into the skin, burrowed, then made eggs there.
That's right, they take there.
And
That's
how
a
did you deal with, what medication was used to exterminate that problem in Dominica?
Oh gosh. I forgot.
Okay. Because I know it was quite common. I heard from my parents, it was quite common.
This is quite common, but I mean, you got it removed and you take a needle and you pull them out.
Yeah, I was told you took a needle and then when you pulled it out plucked it out with a needle, then you rub the area with lime. That's what I was told.
That's right, whatever it is. The actual thing that you did around me, I can't remember.
Okay, no
I
problem.
mean,
Let me ask you about,
again? No.
let me ask you about public health and sanitation. When I was growing up, there was something called antipa that children was given, for worms. Did you see the decrease in worm infestation with the use of shoes once people began to have public toilets and using shoes? Did you see a decrease in worm infestation?
Of course, it's the public toilets that help to decrease the spread of the worms. Because before that, we could just go under the trees and we could just shit. And everybody went in and they ate the mangoes when they fell down. They got the worms and they got sick. And next time we gave them some castor oil or we gave them some, that's a bush. I forgot what the name of the bush.
Is that the one they call tabaxobi?
No, not tabaxobi. So it's a cough and cold.
Is that the one they call dead shot?
Yeah, it's a total dead shot. It's like oil of chinopodium in a leafy form.
So dead shot, the scientific name for dead shot is trinoposium.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My father said to me that was very, very.
If you overdose, they'll kill you. Okay. So I'm going to knock you off.
Okay. So, doctor, before I leave you tonight, can you tell me how you got to Africa? And then we'll wrap up.
How I got to Africa?
To Niger. How you got to the Sahara Desert?
The reason I got to Niger is that the American government wanted to have to see how they could help Niger. But they were more interested in the fact that Niger was the biggest producer of uranium in the world. And they wanted to know, where is that uranium going to? Is there a control system? Whatever is happening there. So they offered to help Niger to develop its health services. And to do that, they employed a group of former American Peace Corps volunteers and influential people in Africa. And that is an agency called Africa. When Africa was looking for a candidate, they found two persons. One was an American and one was a Dominican. When they proposed
and that Dominican was you?
Yeah. The Niger government says, no way, they want that Dominican. He is far more capable and knowledgeable than that American fellow. So the American government could not disagree. So they allowed Africa to recruit me. and they paid me what they would have paid an American consultant, and that was 10 times what I earned in Dominica.
Amazing.
Oh,
So how long were you in Niger?
that changed my life.
Amazing. How long were you in Niger?
5 years.
5 years. And how did you like it?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much. You know, we started some really good work in Niger. Or rather, we tried to accomplish some of the work that the French were thinking of.
What were the main diseases in Niger when you went there?
Oh, there was malaria. There was that was about the main disease, and of course the other disease of sanitation, fever, diarrhea, whatever it was.
And
And
how
of
did you
course,
experience
the
in
particular
Dominica?
problem they had was difficulty in having children. Very, very difficult because there were not enough people trained to deliver the mothers.
In midwifery?
Yes, they didn't have enough midwives. They didn't have enough doctors. You know, you go to a population of about 4 million people and have 1 or 2 doctors. Oh, that's a joke. You can imagine how difficult it was.
Oh my goodness. So you're saying to me that the per capita population of doctors in Niger was lower than in Dominica?
Much, much lower. Very low. It was hard. It's a sub-Saharan area. You know? Lack of food, lack of this, lack of that. Okay.
Okay, well, Doctor, when we
Good.
get back the next time, we'll talk a lot more about your other appointments in Dominica and about, you know, Aberdeen and what you did at Aberdeen. But any final words for the young Dominicans coming up today that can guide them to a better future?
Word for the young Dominicans.
Any words of wisdom?
I'll tell them work hard and you will succeed. You will succeed if you work hard. Teach yourself how best to cope with the situation that you're facing. I mean, if it's agriculture, use scientific method. You know, learn how to do that. We learned how to do that when we were producing bananas before. Bananas, but later on, when geese came in, they used scientific methods.
I'm going to ask you about 2 things. What about this whole culture of SeaWar? How do you see that as an impediment to our development process?
Sure.
Culture of fetting, drinking rum and smoking dope.
Take dope and, you mean rum?
Yeah.
Well, rum has always been a problem. And even right now, it's a problem. And that's why I resisted the introduction of marijuana or any other addictive process. Not that I was against it, but I resisted it. I think if we educate our public, they will recognize that there are no real benefits from becoming an alcoholic. No. You become an alcoholic because you think you get some sort of pleasure out of it, but it doesn't last. I know that. I know lots of alcoholic people. They really did not benefit from it. But we have to start very early on to make sure that the children, they get the right guidance and support.
And what about this idea that people have that, you know, say decriminalize marijuana? I understand decriminalizing that. I agree with that. But what about the prevalence of the use of marijuana in the society? How has that helped or hurt the society?
Marijuana they don't penalize now. They're very hard of it, thing. But I guess if things get tough, people go and rely more on things like marijuana. The times are hard in Dominica, and I can see a lot of young boys. They're having such a tough time that they look for marijuana or girls looking for alcohol. So we have to improve the situation, and hopefully things will get better. It's
How
hard,
important?
and it's hard worldwide. I'm not talking about just Dominica.
How important is integrity, and how important was integrity to your own progress? You mentioned when you were a child, Dominica lost the vanilla market because people started putting in things that were not vanilla, and we lost our trade. That was a lack of integrity in the process. How important is integrity? And then tell me how important is faith in your life.
Huh?
Tell me how important in your life was integrity, and then tell me how important was faith, belief in a superior being in your life.
So there, I have a low battery. Huh?
You're pretty much done. That's the last question.
What was that question again?
What role has integrity played in your life?
Integrity?
Yes.
Meaning what?
Your life, your professional development.
I've been very fortunate, extremely fortunate. I've had lots of people supporting me. Grants, privileges, associationship, For example, I moved from medicine into medical education and developed a university called Ross University that you're all benefiting from in the United States. It was difficult.
You're one of the organizers of Ross University, is that correct?
Exactly.
That was the U.S. university in Dominica, is that correct?
That was exactly what happened.
So it's there for about 40 years?
It's a large number of your doctors now working in family practice and everything are Ross graduates, and they're given a fantastic job. Yes. And people didn't think they could do it. But I said, no, let us create the standards and let us see that they observe these standards. So that for the years, past years, where I concentrated on building Ross.
Do you think there's any way we could have kept Ross in Dominica?
Yes, we could have. But people did not take time to think it out. They acted without thinking. I speak to the people who own Ross, who are in charge of Ross, and they tell me it's not their fault. It's somebody else's fault. But Ross was demanding a lot from government, and government should have known how to cope. Don't just say no. Just say no. We'll see how it can be done. That is it.
Yeah.
You've
Dr.
got to find solutions. Not just say, no, don't do that, I want it, so you can get out. And Ross told me they were virtually not given a chance to say.
And they went to Barbados, is that correct?
They went to Barbados, and then Barbados, God knows how they're going to manage.
Is there any way you think we can one day get another organization like Ross in Dominica?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's very difficult. Very difficult. Because medical education is changing as well. It's changing. How our health services will be changed. You know that. You can't afford it. You in America can't afford your health services. It's costing you too much money. And as a result, people.
I can see artificial intelligence and technology coming on stream to make a lot of different things that were once expensive and difficult, less expensive. But that's
okay.
you and I may not be there. But I just want to say Doctor, I want to thank you for the little time that we had. I enjoyed speaking with you and sharing with us a little bit about your life. How many children did you have and your wife? Give us her name and your children's names.
I had five children.
Give us their names and tell us what they did.
Huh?
Give us their names, tell us what they did.
The eldest is Paula. She went to school. She had 2 degrees.
What was her name?
Paula Shillingford.
Paula.
She's now called Paula Peters. She went and she got a degree in, because I wanted psychology. You need a psychologist in Dominica. I tried my best. Could hardly get them to understand that. Anyway, she did psychology and science. But then she went on to teach because there was no job in Dominica. So she went to Antigua, and I said, if you want to teach, you have to get a degree in education. So she went and she got a degree in education. She came back to Dominica and she was acting as a tutor at a sort of an education teaching thing, teacher training place. But of course, she was only acting, so she was not being paid for what she did.
And what about your son, Damian? You got a son, Damian?
Damian, oh well, he had a tough time in Dominica.
What did he study? I think he studied in Canada.
He studied in Canada and he got his degree in geology, the first degree. And he decided he's getting married, he's coming back to Dominica. And he didn't get on too well in the civil service in Dominica or in Grenada or St. Lucia because he had his own opinion of how things should be done. And politicians always want to listen to you. So that's it.
After Damian, who did you have after Damian?
After Damian, I went to Africa. When I went to Africa, the United States government would pay for my children to go to high school anywhere, the best education. So they really went and benefited, like the foreign people from America, people in the foreign service. So they went on. They did
So
very well.
I know Paula and I know Damian, but you said you have 3 others.
Yes, I have one. The next one there is Paula Damian. Maureen, she went to America. She went to England to boarding school. She went to America to boarding school. She decided she wanted to get married and she stopped bothering about it. So she's working as an executive secretary for the biggest hotel in the United States, and they love her.
Outstanding.
She's enjoying life. And then afterwards, I have Jennifer. Oh God, she did everything. Got a PhD in psychology, and is doing very, very well. But for the last 18 years, she has not worked.
Is she in London or is she
No,
is she
she's
in London?
Toronto.
Is she in the United Kingdom or in the US? Jennifer, is she in the United Kingdom or US?
Jennifer? No, she's in Toronto.
Toronto, Canada.
She's married to a top rich fellow, and that's it.
And who's the last child?
Maureen. No, not Maureen. Juliet.
Julia.
Oh, she's brilliant. Remarkable.
What did she study?
What did she study? What did Juliet study? Physical planning.
Outstanding. And your wife's name, Dr. Shillingford?
Noreen.
Dorian.
Noreen. Noreen. Shillingford.
Noreen. Noreen.
Lovely. Juliet is absolutely brilliant. Really brilliant.
Well,
No.
God bless you and your family. You've done very well for yourself, Doctor.
They
Is-
inherited the intelligence
It's called
from my French Canadian grandfather.
well, don't forget your mother and don't forget your father either.
No, because my mother got it from him and it has gone on. They have done very, very well academically.
Yes, well.
Remarkable. Okay.
Somewhere I was told that the apple never falls far from the tree. So, so God bless
Okay.
you. God bless you, Dr.
I know
Shillingford.
now. Oh, there
And
I
I
am.
will make a copy of this available to you when I get it
Oh,
ready.
I'm crazy here now.
And I look forward to speaking to you again.
Okay then. Bye.
Bye-bye. Night, night.